Kita ke informasi lain, pemikiran Capres Prabowo Subianto satu persatu terkuak. Salah satunya tentang penghinaannya terhadap Gus Dur dan pemikirannya bahwa Indonesia belum siap berdemokrasi dan karenanya butuh rezim otoriter jinak. Hal itu disampaikan oleh seorang jurnalis asing, Alan yang pernah mewawancari Prabowo tahun 2001 lalu.
Kekhawatiran banyak orang tentang sikap Capres Prabowo Subianto yang ingin membangun rezim otoriter terkonfirmasi dengan pernyataan jurnalis Alan yang ditulis di blognya alanarn.org. Dalam wawancara dengan jurnalis Amerika Serikat itu tahun 2001, Prabowo menyebutkan bahwa Indonesia perlu rezim otoriter yang jinak. Selain itu, Alan juga menyebut Prabowo menyatakan keragaman etnis dan agama merupakan penghalang demokrasi. Kubu Prabowo juga membenarkan bahwa Indonesia memang butuh pemimpin otoriter.
Kuat dalam pengertian itu sepantasnya militer. Tapi yang soft, tidak yang otoriter mutlak, tapi dia bisa menjaga keseimbangan antara demokrasi dan stabilitas. Kalau di Prabowo kan ada stabilitas, ada pertumbuhan, ada pemerataan.
Kalangan aktivis menilai pernyataan Prabowo yang diungkap Alan itu bukanlah hal yang mengejutkan. Karena memang sosok Prabowo sudah menunjukkan rekam jejak itu dalam tindakannya.
Bagi saya sih tidak ada otoriter lunak ya, otoriter. Dan kalau Prabowo yang menyatakan itu, saya tidak heran. Kenapa? Karena itu sudah tercermin dari tindakan Prabowo sendiri. Yang kalau kita lihat, kita runut dari kasus penculikan aktivis 98 ya. Di situ kan dia melakukan penghilangan paksa, menculik aktivis-aktivis yang bersuara kritis menentang Soeharto pada waktu itu. Nah, orang yang otoriter itu tidak suka mendengar suara orang yang berbeda.
Selain masalah itu, menurut Alan Prabowo juga menghina Presiden keempat Abdurrahman Wahid yang disebutnya buta dan memalukan. Tim Liputan Metro TV.
Jurnalis investigasi Amerika Serikat Alan mengungkap ke publik wawancaranya dengan Prabowo Subianto pada tahun 2001. Dalam wawancara tersebut, Prabowo mengatakan Indonesia dipimpin oleh Gus Dur yang buta dan Indonesia sesungguhnya membutuhkan rezim otoriter yang lunak. Kita ikuti wawancara eksklusif saya dengan Alan beberapa saat yang lalu. Purpose of the interview back in 2001?
I was investigating some recent murders that apparently involved the army. So I wanted...
This is in Timor, yeah?
No, not in Timor. These were not murders. These murders happened elsewhere in Indonesia.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask Prabowo if he would give any inside information about those murders. So that's why I offered him the anonymity.
You mentioned in your blog, you mentioned a lot of information were disclosed during off-the-record conversations. How did you two get in deep conversations about sensitive issues, I must say? How did that happen?
Well, we spoke for almost 4 hours. Prabowo said he did not know about those particular murders, but then he started talking about other topics. He said that Indonesia is not ready for democracy. Indonesia needs a benign authoritarian regime. He said he talked about.
He said that we need dictatorship.
Well, he said a benign authoritarian regime.
All right.
And then he talked about his admiration for General Pervez Musharraf of Pakistan, the military dictator of Pakistan. He said, Prabowo asked, "Do I have the guts to be called a fascist dictator?" Musharraf had the guts.
Right.
And he also started ranting about Gus Dur, who was president at that time.
Right.
Prabowo said, the army even obeys a blind president. Imagine. Look at other countries. Tony Blair, Bush, Putin, Young, Ganteng, and we have a blind man. It's embarrassing.
But this is off the record.
He was speaking off the record, but I decided to open up what he said because Prabowo now has a chance to become president of Indonesia, and I feel that the Rakyat Indonesia have the right to hear the facts about him.
It sounded that he was upset during that interview.
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes he became emotional. The main topics on which he became emotional were, one, democracy, fascism, and Gus Dur. He was very animated, sometimes angry when talking about that. And second, when he talked about his relationship to America. In my new blog article, the second one, I talk about how Prabowo told me about how for many years he worked with American intelligence, how he worked with American special forces, and how Prabowo even brought armed American troops into Indonesia. And Prabowo told me that the American troops who came here used that opportunity to make what he described as the contingency plan for an American invasion of Indonesia, should they decide to do that in the future. And what Prabowo told me is verified by internal Pentagon documents.
As I was saying, this is like an off-the-record conversation, and you finally choose to share it to us while he is running for the president.
Right.
What made you think that this is important for us to know about who he is?
Because he is on the verge of assuming state power in Indonesia. He will be in command of the army. He will have the power to kill people through the aparat of Indonesia. And there is no one else, as far as I know, in Indonesia who has killed as many civilians as General Prabowo.
And he admitted.
The record shows that. And one very significant thing Prabowo said to me. He said when we discussed the Santa Cruz massacre, he said, and you can look at my blog for the exact quotation, but in Timor, he said, in effect, well, you can do massacre in the desa-desa jauh, mana nggak ada saksi, tapi jangan bikin bantaian di depan saksi dari luar negeri. Jadi Prabowo kata bahwa perintah itu for the Santa Cruz massacre, he said it was imbecilic because it was done in front of me, because it was done in front of other foreign witnesses, and we were able to report this to the outside world and mobilize world opinion to cut off American weapons to the TNI. But he was saying, if you do that in the Gunung, in the Desa-Desa, it's fine.
Right. Okay, that was Timor. But did he mention anything about what happened in '98 with you?
I asked about that. He did not want to talk about that. He would not discuss his own crimes.
He did not want to discuss his own, whether it's off the record.
That's right. Even off the record, he did not want to discuss his own crimes.
So you mentioned about Gus Dur and what Prabowo said about Gus Dur, and now his team is using Gus Dur as one of their campaign symbol or slogan. And when you see that fact now, what went on to your mind based on what your conversation with Prabowo about Gus Dur at that time?
Well, it was clear during our conversation how Prabowo felt about Gus Dur.
Was he upset with him?
Yes, he was, and it was
ashamed.
Yes, ashamed, ashamed and angry. It was, yeah. Well, it was interesting because I had not asked him about Gus Dur. He brought it up. He brought up Gus Dur himself. We were talking in general terms about democracy. And then Prabowo started to say, Indonesia is not ready for democracy. There are too many religions, too many ethnic groups, too many regions. Indonesia needs an authoritarian regime. And then as his example, this was his argument against democracy. His argument against democracy was the fact that the army was obeying Gus Dur. That the army was obeying not just a civilian, but a blind civilian. And Prabowo said, it's embarrassing. He cited as a better example the military dictatorship of Pakistan, of General Pervez Musharraf, and it was then that Prabowo started talking about fascism and said, do I have the guts to be called a fascist dictator? Musharraf had the guts. Yeah, I've gotten some, but that's normal.
Ever since this story blew up, the story about the off-the-record conversation.
Yeah, but the danger isn't for me, it's local people who face some danger, not me.